I'm never going to get out of this program, or I can never make a fire. And then as soon as they made that fire, just think about it. You said you were never going to be able to do this. What else in your life have you said that you would never be able to do? As soon as you have a tangible result of overcoming something difficult, it enables you to override that little voice in your head. And you could see their brain just like churning over. And while they might not, they might dismiss you in that moment, it was something that enabled them to like really sit and also be proud of. Doing something difficult means that nobody will ever be able to take that away from you. Those ideas that pop into your head at a random moment are not random. They were given to you for a reason. While that reason may not be apparent to you in the moment, I really urge you to just acknowledge whatever that thought is and to honor it by actually pursuing it. Because you have no idea how that one idea of yours could potentially not just change your own life, but somebody else's. And the learning that comes through pursuing that simple thought could be the greatest thing that you ever do.
Welcome to another episode of Success with Purpose, where we help mentor you into becoming a more successful version of yourself. We do this through giving you access to mentors you typically would never have the opportunity to connect with. We explore their journeys, their experiences, their life-changing events, their fields of expertise, and most importantly, their purpose. My name is Harry Goldberg, husband to an incredible woman, father of 2 amazing daughters, host, interviewer, and interrogator of this podcast. And now, just before we learn from yet another exceptional guest, if you find value from these conversations, please make sure to like and subscribe below, leave a review. It really does make a difference. And of course, share with someone else who's going to find value. Now, listen in, pay attention, take some notes, enjoy. Let's begin. Andrew Patterson, welcome.
Oh, it's great to be here. Thank you.
Great to have you here. It's always lovely when a fellow podcast guest invites another podcast guest on. And for the listeners, a very brief description of you is that you're a founder and experienced creator at Andrew 365. You're also VP of Stakeholder Engagement at a charity called One Heart for Kids. You've had a few pretty cool achievements, including climb Tabletop Mountain every day for a year. You've written a book. You're originally from South Africa, and now you're working over in the States. And so I'm really looking forward to diving into your journey.
Yeah, it's been one hell of a journey. I mean, I'm turning 45 in just over a week. I feel like I'm almost I used to play cricket, so I'm almost at the 50 not out mark, which is great.
Tell me, how do you define success?
Well, success has been a very interesting journey for me, and even just understanding it. And I think if you'd asked me when I was 17, it probably would have equated to money. But as I've gotten older and as I've had more experiences, I've also gotten to learn more about my culture in South Africa and how many different people we have and languages and diverse backgrounds. Ubuntu is one of the most incredible things for me that is essentially, I am because you are. And so for me, success has become, how do I become the best version of myself in service of my community? And it's really equates to 3 simple steps for me. And that is learning something new, mastering that something new, and then knowing it so well that I can teach other people what I've learned.
When you were younger, it used to just be about money. That's what success was.
Yeah.
And now you have more age, you have more experience, and you've re-explored the culture of your homeland in South Africa. With a lot of diverse backgrounds, diverse cultures, and one of the teachings, Ubuntu, you've really stuck with. You said it's becoming something, I can't remember the exact words, but I think it was the best version of yourself so that you can be the best version of you for your community.
Yeah.
And then you want to learn new things to be able to learn new skills, to be able to master new skills, to be able to teach it to others.
Yeah. So success for me now, where, this moment right now is, what can I learn in terms of being better for myself? How do I master that? And then the way that I'm able to teach that to other people is how you then become the best way to serve your community. So it's basically taking what I've learned about Ubuntu and how it was subliminally kind of embedded in, my surroundings. Because obviously growing up in South Africa, especially as a 44-year-old man, I was in the end stages of apartheid. I wasn't really privy to how bad it was. I knew there were some differences, but I was, very aware when Nelson Mandela got released from prison. He came and spoke at our school when I was 13 years old. I had no idea how profound that moment actually was. But, as I've gotten older and started to understand the depths to what people have gone to for like just me being able to sit in front of you living in the States. If this was 40 years ago, I wouldn't have been able to do this. They would have had restrictions, and rightly so. And, just understanding what people have gone, and I might not be black, but it doesn't mean that Ubuntu hasn't had a profound impact just because of the surroundings of what I've grown up in, just having black friends at school. I was very fortunate that we had, the first kind of age group where 10% of our class was black, which in those days was kind of unheard of. One of my dearest friends, Mel, we're still friends to this day. And in fact, what's incredible when I look back on it is I didn't have a lot of friends at high school. I felt like the odd one out. I didn't feel like I connected with anybody. I wasn't cool. I wasn't academic. I was sporty, but not that sporty. So I was in this weird middle ground. And he was like the cool kid who would play chess with me. He was just like, he always jokes about like, he just did it because I had a hot sister. He was 2 years older than me. But it's like, you never really truly can understand how the smallest thing that someone else does for you impacts you. And that's why I said, like, just even as I was getting, as an older white guy and understanding like the impact of what apartheid had done to people my same age, and just being able to have a question with Mel and colleagues and say to them, why don't you tell me what your life was like? And just being able to sit and listen to what people had been through, that were the same age as me or older, like it was horrific. And within like the first couple of seconds of talking to people, their eyes would well up, and it really hit me hard because, it wasn't like I had done anything to them personally, but it wasn't like they had done anything to deserve that either. So it's just this like weird juxtaposition of seeing how I had benefited from a system without having any part in it really, or my family for that matter. But seeing how other people had struggled and been through that challenge, and learning to see it through a different lens versus just like, oh, well, that's over now, you should just get on with it.
So what is the essence of Ubuntu then?
The essence of Ubuntu is that, the full phrase actually translates directly into a person is a person because of another person. And so it's essentially saying that, no man is an island. Everything that you do, like I didn't make this t-shirt, I didn't create the laptop, I didn't build the microphone. There's so much that we benefit from society, the community as a whole. And so Ubuntu is like, it's a way of living that pushes you to be like your best version of yourself, and knowing that will actually eventually be a benefit to society or your community, and vice versa. The better the people around you are pushing themselves, the more that's going to benefit you as well.
Okay. And if we backtrack a little bit, you were talking about how successful you now are starting to master what you've already learned. So you're trying to master what you've learned to be the best version of yourself, to be able to give that to others and teach it to others and do the best for your community.
For me, it's a little bit more than it, because the way I see it is, just think of it as like a TV game or video games. You don't start on level 35. You see a game, you enjoy it, and it's always a little bit harder than the current skill. You've got to push yourself to spend some hours practicing it, and then you get really good at that level. You break through, you think you're wonderful, you get to level 2 and you get destroyed. And you kind of like, basically you've got to start all over again, but you're at a different level. And if you had to go back to level 1, you would probably wipe the floor and do a lot better than when you first started. So the way I see it is, it's not that you just master what you've learned now. You continue to push yourself to learn something new. And then the way that you master that is to, different people talk about like doing things for 10,000 hours, meditating, learning and growing about yourself. It's never really an end goal of like, oh, I've reached this pinnacle point and now that's it. It's kind of really more along the line of enjoying the process of the journey of discovering what you're capable of. And the way I see it is, it's kind of like, learning is the first phase of like, oh my God, I've decided to do this new thing. I'm starting my own business. It's terrifying. You don't know what the hell you're doing. There's so much to learn. But then as you find different people, courses, podcasts, mentors, different aspects that help you start to master your craft and your business, as an example, then suddenly you can create a 6-figure business, a multi-million-dollar business. And then it's like, okay, how do I teach somebody else to do this? And what's been really interesting for me as well is, because I came from South Africa, there's so much poverty. The hardest thing for me has been learning to recognize the difference between helping somebody and rescuing them. And we don't like seeing people in pain. And I don't have children of my own, but when I moved to the States, and specifically in Asheville, where I am now, for a while, I worked in wilderness therapy where we had kids who had different challenges, Most of them had been neglected by their parents or abused. They had drug, maybe alcohol-related issues. And one of the most interesting things with that process was getting them to understand that they were worthy of love and care and attention. And for them to then take what we were teaching them and apply it to themselves. And in that process of trying to work with them, the hardest thing for me was realizing that my first reaction was to rescue them constantly. And I had to override that constant until it became natural to actually just allow them to go through the discomfort, and that my job was to have the conversation with them after they messed up. We were there just to create the safe space for them to explore and learn essentially how they were going to become the best versions of themselves, and understand that there are natural consequences to our actions. And, if you ever be taught that, then you can live in a bubble and think that, the world owes you everything. And we've just gone through an actual natural disaster here in Asheville. And it's some of people's first real difficult thing in life. And what's incredible for me is, while it's been devastating to our community, our businesses, people who've lost their lives or their property, it's still not the hardest thing that I've ever gone through. And it's, life is so complex. It's about 5 years ago, I would have had a very different response to people. But having gone through wilderness therapy, where I've actually learned how to work with people and how to help them on their own journey, means that, you can listen to people who this natural disaster is their first real challenge in life, and how to both process it, work through it, and continue to move on in a positive way. Because you can either become bitter or better. That's what it kind of boils down to.
And so, if success to you is more about this journey of constantly improving and constantly learning new things and mastering it and helping other people with it, helping rather than rescuing, how do you know that you're successful? How do you know that you're living a successful life, or that you've achieved an element of success?
Well, I suppose it depends on what is it that you're specifically looking to get out of life. And so from a very young age, I was constantly looking to really help everyone else. And what I didn't realize at the time was that what I really wanted to do was help myself. So the way I view success is both, how have I managed to really deal with challenging circumstances and put myself in them rather than waiting for something like a natural disaster, and then being able to not lead somebody to the water, but to be able to get them to see and fall in love with the process of getting better. So that's kind of like my success. And also what I've learned is success can be such an arbitrary benchmark, because what I might not think is successful in terms of working with one of these kids, they might end up becoming the president of the United States. And they may look back on working with us as a group as the pivotal point that changed their life. And while I was just one of, say, 30 people that was dedicated to working with them, it doesn't mean that my 30 plus hours that I spent with them being able to have a one-on-one conversation, that there wasn't a nugget in there that basically was part of the bigger picture or piece of the puzzle that enabled them to get to that point. So I think success as well as, you might not have the greatest view of success right now. As an example, I've just launched my book. I've sold maybe 30 copies, both ebook and the printed version, which has only been available for 2 weeks. I can look at myself and be like, I should have sold 100 copies by now. I'm not successful. Or I could be like, let me see where I am a year from now. What is the effort that I'm going to be putting in towards getting this book out? Because one person may read this book and have a huge epiphany and go and push themselves beyond their limitations. Or I could sell this book and become a New York Times bestseller and have millions of dollars in the bank, have the nice sticker on my book, and no one does anything with my book. So is that really successful? So for me personally, the success is more around, am I growing as a person in this process? And how is me growing in this process benefiting my desire to help others on their own journey?
Okay. So the way that you're measuring your engagement with your level of success, or your level of success itself, is kind of just checking in with yourself in terms of how much are you doing the difficult things, how much are you putting yourself in the challenges and pursuing them, and then to be able to handle them, and then to try and create an impact on other people's lives.
100%. Because the reality is, we can pretend like we can lie to ourselves, but we know if you have an idea to do something, you can reframe that idea to your family and your best friends so that they could talk you out of it. And you'd be like, yeah, that would probably be the wrong thing to do. Or you know that this is what you need to do. And instead of asking for people's permission or kind of validation, you could do it anyway. And when people start saying, oh, you're wasting your time, what are you thinking? They don't understand what you're doing. And you're just like, it doesn't matter. I know that it means something to me. And while you might not have, when I had the idea to climb Table Mountain every day for a year, it's a perfect example. Almost, I would say about 7 different people actually got the message from me and were excited about it with me, shared my enthusiasm, were as pumped up. The radio silence that I got, even from family members, was really difficult for me to process. And I had to really tap back into like, okay, why was I going to do this?
Just quickly, because people listening might not know what Table Mountain is. Do you want to explain what it means to climb Tabletop Mountain?
Table Mountain is, if you ever seen a picture of Cape Town, Table Mountain is the iconic kind of one of 3 mountains in the background behind the city. So you've got Devil's Peak, which is usually to the left. Then the flat part is what's called Table Mountain. And then there's a little bit to the right that's a little bit smaller called Lion's Head. And, it's 1,000 meters above sea level. It's at sea level. So it's a full kilometer for those of us who are in the States and they don't know what kilometers are still. It's about 3,300 feet. It's really iconic because it's got these steep granite cliffs and it's older than the Himalayas. It's one of the oldest mountain ranges in the world. And it's just the flat part of it and it being so close to the ocean is what makes it so iconic. And, for me, I'd lived in Cape Town. I'm from Johannesburg originally, but I'd lived in Cape Town for my full life. It was 13 years. But at that stage, it was 11 years when I had the idea. And, that actually came out of a transition because the corporate company that I was working for had been there for 5 years. I wanted to climb the ladder. They went through a restructure and I just had a feeling and knew that I was going to be on the chopping block. I couldn't explain it to anybody, but I just knew. And I was in a very specialized role called category management. And long story short, the restructure also forced me to reevaluate my relationship with the business. And I was like, is this the company that I want to work for? It was an alcohol company. I had started to get a deeper sense of the principles and the strategies targeting the poorest of South Africans on how to buy their products. And I know everybody does it, but that doesn't mean it's okay. And I knew that the higher I went up the company, the more I was going to be part of that and responsible for that. Anyway, so when I didn't get the promotion because my job had been made redundant, I basically used that as a way to just say to them, you know what, thank you. I'm going to just part ways with you. You can give me the severance package. We're done. Which is probably the single most terrifying moment of my life because I was 37. I didn't really have a clear goal of like, oh my God, this is a clear path of what I want to do for the rest of my life. And so now I'm going to do that. But I just knew that kind of corporate South Africa was not where I wanted to do. And, for the first time in my life, I had started actively thinking about what is it that I want to do with my life? What is it that I really love? And I was thinking about, I love hiking, so maybe I could start a hiking tourism company, and target some of the tourists that come to Cape Town, which is one of the most visited long-haul destination flights in the world because of its beauty and its people. And I was also like, well, I loved raising money for charities and working with them. It came very easy to me. So I was like, well, maybe there's a way that I could use my set of skills a couple of days a week and work with them. And then the kind of final straw was I've been writing since I was in my early 20s. It was always a great way for me to kind of escape the world and as a poor communicator verbally get my thoughts down on paper and kind of get everything that was, going around in my head like a washing machine and out of it. And the catalyst was, also I was thinking about, okay, if I start my own business, how am I going to stay fit and active through winter? Because that's the hardest time for me. I usually hibernate and hit the snooze button. And it becomes very easy when it's raining outside and it's dark to not go to gym at 5 o'clock in the morning. And so, I was like thinking maybe I could do like a half Ironman or something that would just give me the training program and the discipline to be able to like work towards this long-term goal. Anyway, when I was thinking about like, maybe I could write a book, I asked the question, but write about what? And somewhere in the deep recesses of my brain answered me immediately with climb Table Mountain every day for a year. What was so profound about that answer is it was so simple, and yet it ticked every single box that I had been working on. I always remember one of my jobs when I was a student was working at a golf pro shop, and this guy walked around constantly saying it's just one idea to become like successful. It's like, it's just one. Why can't I have it? And I thought about him with the rest of that 40-minute journey to work because I was like, wow, maybe this is my one idea. And while I now see that there is no kind of one big thing. There's a lot of them that happen, not concurrently, but once, like they bring it back to the TV game. Once you've reached level 1, great, you've passed that test. Now we're going to give you the next challenge. And for me, what was interesting as a 37-year-old with that idea was I instantly was excited about it because I knew it was going to be my life test, challenging everything that I'd ever done physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. And that excited me the most because, just like we're at school and you get exams at the end of the year to test how well you've understood what you've gone through, I felt like this was testing everything in one challenge. And thankfully, I have made many mistakes overestimating my physical abilities and underestimating challenges previously, specifically on Table Mountain, where I thought, I'll just basically trained like I was going on for a sprint, but the event was a marathon, and I completely messed up my hip that I couldn't run for 6 months.
Oh, wow.
But that was one of the greatest lessons for me retroactively, because it was like, okay, you need to train properly for this, because I wanted to get to the end of the event and actually be able to walk for the rest of my life and not be, have permanent damage. So my brain, thankfully, because I've been, so physically active since I was 17, well, I mean, at school, but like actually going to gym, never skipped leg day, actually did that at the gym, trail running and cycling, hiking in Cape Town. It's, my legs were really strong. And so my brain was like, okay, how do you take your base level of fitness now and create a program so that when you start on the 1st of January, your body isn't like, what the hell are we doing? It's like, okay, we know what we're in for and everything's going to be okay.
Right. You don't want to be David Goggins with no ligaments left. Or with no strength left in his knees. He's basically got no knees. So was this to climb up and climb down? Were you aiming for any particular time, or was the goal just to simply get up, go around, come down every day?
So it's interesting. The event that I had done where I completely ruined my hip was basically starting at the cable station, walk across, up the mountain, across and down the cable car. Right. And so I actually was like, I'm just going to do the same route. But I also knew that we have an insane wind in Cape Town and they shut down 2 weeks of the year for maintenance. So in my brain, I was like, I'm probably going to have about 100 days a year. I'll have to climb up and down. And it ended up being 90. So I was pretty close. But the main idea was to climb up. And I also loved about my brain was that it attached the fundraising aspect that I'd done to this. So it was going to be a ridiculous challenge for me to do every day for a year. But I was like, don't just donate money, come and be part of the climb. So what's today? Today is the 27th. It's a leap year, so it's the 301st day of the year. So I was like, come and be part of day 301 out of 365. Well, this year would be 366. But it was amazing because so many people who lived in Cape Town have never climbed Table Mountain before, and they saw me doing it every day for a year, and it gave them the permission to be like, okay, if he's doing it, I'm going to come and do it with him. And I think that was the greatest gift I gave myself was the community aspect. What was ironic was I thought I was going to be teaching others about Ubuntu, and what ended up happening was I ended up being given the greatest gift of learning what Ubuntu really means. And, to be supported by over 25 different countries, people coming from places like Iceland, hiking up with me on my birthday, a woman from Switzerland hiking up on Nelson Mandela's birthday, and my gran was Swiss. And she came and did it with my security guard that worked in my building that had never even been up to the bottom of the cable car, let alone to the top of the mountain. And he had tried to do it twice before that. And I was just like, wow, Nelson Mandela's birthday, he would have been 100. It was the 100th time I'd had a group of people join me. And it was a white woman from Switzerland and a black guy from South Africa. That was like I couldn't have scripted it better if I had wanted to. So it was just a beautiful way of also having a goal and then just allowing the process to unfold and being able to kind of roll with the punches and, not try and manicure every little detail. Because I could have been one of those people who was like, okay, so Nelson Mandela's birthday, 100 years, I'm going to try and get 100 people to climb up with me in that week and like really overthink it and overcomplicate it. And, what I also learned was because I'm so numbers driven in the beginning, I was like, wow, if I get 20 people a day and they each donate R1 per day, I'm going to be able to raise 15,000 Rand a month, and like how quickly that expands out. And I got so excited about it. And then I quickly realized 20 people a day is a lot of people on a very thin path up the mountain. I wouldn't have gotten to know anybody because you get spread out pretty quickly. And the days when I had one person climbing with me that it took 6 hours to get up there were more meaningful, more impactful than the days where I had the biggest group of the year. So, it was a wonderful year of teaching me where value really lies instead of seeking what I thought would be bringing the value.
Okay. And then what did that lead to? So you'd be building your way up in corporate. You knew there wasn't really any path forward for you, got offered a redundancy. You weren't aligned with the company either way, so you opted for it. You didn't know what to do. You loved hiking, raising money for charities. You loved riding. It's like, okay, fine. Let's just randomly decide to climb Tabletop Mountain every day for a year. And you started doing that. You connect with lots of people. You raised money for charity. All pretty cool. You got to the end of that year, and then what?
Well, the other part of the story is, your personal relationships. And what is it? 30th of June was my last day in corporate. And probably about 6 weeks later, a friend of mine that was from Cape Town, that was living in the States, got hold of me on Facebook and said, hey, I've got a friend who's coming to Cape Town. Would you be okay if she loves the outdoors? And I know you're practicing for your climbs and everything and training. Would you be okay if I connected you and she joined you on your hikes? And I was like, yeah, of course. I know what it's like to go to another country and be taken around by a local. It's a completely different experience. It's amazing to see how locals live rather than just all the touristy things.
Sure.
Anyway, she's now my wife. And what was amazing is that relationship also happened completely organically and completely different to any other relationship I'd ever had, because I'd already committed to Table Mountain every day for a year. So in my brain, this person from overseas, there was no chance of forming a relationship with them because I'm stuck here and I'm not going to expect her to be flying over all the time. And anyway, she's probably the first person, my mom said, that really connected with my heart and understands who I am and what I'm doing. Anyway, so we did long distance for 18 months, and she was incredible during the climbs. She flew out 3 times that year to be there for the 100th climb. She was there for a week. She was there over the halfway period, which she didn't realize at the time how necessary it was for her and for me to actually get over that emotional hurdle. And then she was there at the end. She was the second most, well, she was the person who joined me on the mountain the second most, and she lived the furthest away. So it also just shows you like her heart and her commitment, and also what a badass she is, that she's on 2 long-haul flights from San Francisco to come to Cape Town, gets off the plane and then climbs on with me the next day. But anyway, so I thankfully already had a visa to go to the States. So I went to San Francisco. I was going to start working on my book. And this is where choosing the right partner is so important, because we decided to move to New York in 2020 because it was closer to South Africa, both in terms of distance to fly home and also just to communicate with people, being on the East Coast versus the West Coast. We were in New York 6 weeks before the pandemic hit. We were supposed to get married. That was going to help me get my green card and my work permit. And all of a sudden, all of that gets put on the back foot. And so now there's the financial stress on top of that as well. That started, as time, yes, I'd finished my book. And during COVID, I was sending it out to literary agents and getting absolutely no response from people. In fact, I was basically ghosted from everybody, not even just a thank you for your inquiry, but this is not what we do. It was literally no response back. And I could kind of understand it. Like, everybody was probably emotionally tapped out during COVID, but it doesn't kind of excuse you from just being a human being to somebody else and saying, you know what, thanks, but rather try this avenue or something else. Anyway, so that stress was immense. And I was also putting a lot of pressure on myself, because I was like, wow, I've done this amazing physical activity. I need to instantly turn this into 3-figure business. What I've learned is that's not how life works for me at all. It's like having the idea is great. And then it's like, okay, so what is the next phase that you need to get to? And a couple of really amazing things happened. Jesse connected me with a guy who had his own online marketing digital agency company, and he was looking for a copywriter. So I was like, okay, well, I'm figuring stuff out. Let me do this. And essentially what I was doing was listening to a podcast like yours, and we would turn the long podcast into a multi-purpose media output of like an article for your website or a post for your Instagram. Anyway, so one of the guys that I was listening to, Kyle, he creates these men's experiences in the States. So I kept like listening to it and I'm like, wow, I'd love to do these. And then I was listening to all the places that he was going to and what they were doing. And I was like, man, you know, these things in Cape, we have all of these in Cape Town in abundance and more. And so then this sort of get me think like, how do I kind of create this kind of trip using what I've known about South Africa? And also South Africa needs a lot of help with tourism. And also South Africans can help a lot of international people with the resilience that they have and the humanity that they showed it to each other through that. Through those difficult challenges. So started doing that, but we got tired of New York. So we decided to move to Asheville in 2022. And her cousin had recommended it because we were looking for a beautiful mountain town. We got married through COVID on a road trip in Glacier National Park. And while it's immensely beautiful there in summer, it's got like this much snow, which is great to ski in, but not great when you're shoveling your driveway and having to drive everywhere in it. And so that's why her cousin recommended Asheville. And, you know, again, it's amazing how things work out. Within 3 days of us both deciding, let's leave New York, let's go to Asheville, she happened to be online and came across this job application for wilderness therapy, working with kids. And she read it and she came to me, and it was like she'd seen the best ghost. She was happy, but just like, you know, in complete shock. And she's like, you need to read this. And it felt like it had been written for me. And the final aspect, because it's not that I know that I can't help others, but what I was really struggling was, how am I going to help others? Because while I know I can climb a mountain every day, I also don't have the survivor bias of like, I did it, so you can too. Like, no. I actually came out of that experience seeing how disingenuous so many people are on the internet of, just because they did it, they tell you that you can do it too. When there's so many more things like your environment, your upbringing, your mindset, where you are, what your goals are, so many different things. But anyway, so the wilderness therapy job came available. I applied for it. We were actually in South Africa at that stage, helping One Heart, who I still support. It was one of the nonprofits that I was raising money for in terms of building literacy in South Africa. Because, you know, my whole thing is first principles. So if South Africa's education or unemployment is terrible, where does it really start? And if you can't read at grade 4, you're screwed. It doesn't matter what happens after that. If you are unable to read, that really hampers you so much in terms of your progress in life on mass scale. Obviously, as an individual, there'll be anecdotal stuff of people that overcome that. And the story, again, is amazing, but that's not the reality for most people. So we're in South Africa working with them, trying to build this partnership with the government to expand the reading program. And so I saw this application, applied for it in South Africa, had an interview over the phone with my family like 2 days before we were going to be coming back to the States, and got the job. And it was the hardest thing I've ever done in my entire life, but equally as rewarding. And it's given me a deep understanding and appreciation why the world is so messed up, and why it's going to be so difficult for us to change. Because, you know, think about it. If every single person in the world right now just decided to end wars or to not abuse anybody, abuse would disappear like that. That just takes each individual person making that decision. But you have to be the one that makes that decision. And, you know, SUS stands for the School of Urban and Wilderness Skills. And they've been around for over 20 years. And essentially, we lived in the wilderness with these kids for 8 days on, 6 days off. And we would have to carry everything that we ate, that we slept under. They had a whole bunch of different tasks that they would work through. And what really connected me to this program was the fact that they used the wording rite of passage. Because I also feel that, you know, as we become more disconnected from, you know, indigenous cultures and each other as communities, there's that rite of passage that, you know, of where it doesn't matter where you go in the world, of where kids were always kind of being pushed like, right, you're going to be moving into adulthood now. You're going to be leaving that kidvine. And I don't know if you've ever heard or listened to Carl Jung.
Yeah.
So he's got the 4 archetypes of men. And, you know, the way that he talks about boys masquerading as men is one of the most profound kind of lectures and things that I've ever heard. And so it was also good for me to understand, like, where's my shadow in terms of being like the king energy or the magician energy. And so this was the first time that I was actually like, right, this is not about me. This is all about the kids. You are the best person to work as a team to help these kids. how are you going to do that? What was also interesting is I'm the type of person that I want to share everything about myself. I want to be vulnerable and I want to be as open as possible. And they said in the beginning, there's two types of instructors. There's the ones that the kids will know everything about you, and there's the ones that know nothing about you. And for me, I chose that one because I knew it was going to be harder for me. It was also a test for me in that process of working with them to be not as open as I normally would. And it was actually quite fun at some stage because they were, start guessing how old I was. And they started talking about like, oh, Andrew's probably got like 20 million YouTube followers and gets dropped off to work in his Lamborghini by his driver. And it was interesting to just see like how these kids' imaginations would run wild just because of a simple thing of like, they didn't know how old I was. Or, obviously they knew I was from South Africa, but that's basically it.
Oh, you could have been copying the accent too, right?
Well, it's funny you say that because I'm pretty good with accents. And eventually one of the instructors came to me and was like, how do we actually know you are South African? Maybe you just really good. Maybe just really good at the sun.
So these were mostly disadvantaged kids, were they? Was this a charity doing this, or was this like parents putting their kids in for a rite of passage?
Actually, 9 out of 10 of them were from the wealthiest of wealthy families in the States. And it was also interesting for me because, you had some of the instructors complaining like, this... And I agree with them. This type of program should be available to everybody, and it's only available to the rich kids. And I'm like, yes, but it's also the rich kids who are being abandoned by their families that need to be here. So you can't just say it's one or the other. But it was extremely expensive for these parents to put their kids in the program. The program was typically anything from 60 to 90 days. The longest kid that we had there while I was there was like 112 days. And, that was all up to the kids. It's like they kept thinking that we were the ones that had put them there. And it was getting them to reframe, we're not doing anything to you. And it was also really interesting as an adult being there and seeing the different experiences that even my colleagues were having. Is nature is beautiful because it meets everybody where they're at. It didn't be like, oh, Andrew, you're going to get this special attention. When we lived in a rainforest, when it rained and you didn't pack your stuff away, it got wet. And there is nothing worse than crawling into a wet sleeping bag when you know it's going to be getting pretty cold that night. And that kid learned very quickly not to do that again. But, a lot of these kids, like I said, they either had incredible behavioral issues. Maybe it was their last strike that a lenient judge was like, instead of sending you to juvenile hall or jail, I'm going to give you this one chance, this lifeline, and you're going to do this program. And if you can get through it with flying colors, then we can look at what the next step is rather than sending you to jail. And some of the stories of even like the young girls that, she almost got kicked out of our program twice. And thankfully, the therapist was just able to really have this gut feel about like she was making progress with her. And just before that program was shut down, Scott actually gave me a book that Desmond Tutu's granddaughter wrote called Everyday Ubuntu. And he was like, I know you know this, but I saw this book and I just thought it would be great for you. And what was incredible about it is while I understand Ubuntu inherently within me, I was unable to explain to you what the principles of Ubuntu are. Whereas the book very eloquently illustrates the 13 different principles of Ubuntu. So I decided to just take a chance and take the book to work with me and say to the group, I'm here for 4 days with you because I was working a half shift. There's 4 of you in the group. Each day, why don't you pick which chapter you'd like me to read, and I'll read that for everybody to listen to. And this girl that almost got sent to jail, got kicked out of the program twice, is the one that resonated the most with this, wrote a letter to her mom about how amazing like learning about Ubuntu was, that her mom bought the book, bought the audiobook. And when we got shut down as a program and she moved to another program, her mom gave her the actual physical copy so she could continue reading it herself. And when she was in this other program, she was reading to the kids in the program. And like, it was just so cool to be able to see something that was such an innocuous decision from Scott's perspective, like, oh, I see this book on the shelf. He could have chosen not to buy it. And that moment of like me looking at it before I went, I was like, they're not going to want to listen to what my culture has to say. And yet that could be maybe one of those profound impacts in her life that, I'm looking forward to seeing her name up in lights one day and being like, yep, the spirit of that young girl and what she overcame is one of the greatest things that I've ever been witnessed.
So you got the redundancy, climbed Tabletop Mountain, you found your wife, you ended up in the States, you ended up coming back to South Africa or doing a lot of work in South Africa with teaching kids in the wilderness. And then you learned how to help other people rather than just that you could. You learned that you actually can because you learned how. And how long were you doing that for?
I was doing that for just over a year.
Okay, and then what?
Well, then amazing. Like life was just like, okay, so you've now learned this, and now your idea of how to create these kind of experiences back to Cape Town. You're done with teaching the kids. Now you know you can do this, and you have a meaningful way of holding space for people. And now it's like, great, here's your chance to be able to really dive into that and really thrash that out and create it and basically give it a life. And the benefit of me being in the States is, again, I have access to things like there's the International Conference for Incentive Travel and Business Travel. It's called IMEX, and it's in Vegas. And our friend's Gran has just moved to Vegas. And it's a free conference, and I was able to go there just on a whim of like, I've created this package, and how do I now basically get in front of people and start building relationships so that I can actually create this incentive travel business, one experiential company to Cape Town. So ironically, tying back to my original idea of creating a hiking tourism company, now it would be a tourism company, but just in another kind of different avenue. And so that's kind of where I am now. While I was there, managed to find this company that they actually deal with 30 of the top, buyers for companies that are giving them multi-million dollars worth of budgets. And I was able to get featured by them in their online magazine this year. I got to chat to the owner, and she's like, I really love what you're doing. And she's like, we've got these conferences, and this is how much it's going to be to participate, to speak to these buyers. I'm like, okay, that's a lot outside of my budget right now. COVID was tough. Immigration has not been cheap. I've been in a rebuilding phase ever since I left South Africa. But I'm like, this is a great goal for me to work towards. And that's what I'm doing right now. Like, I'm doing everything I can. I currently have an amazing job at Whole Foods where I get to be the store trainer, and I get to work with people on an individual basis and take everything that I've learned and teach them that when you want to change the world, like, your world is all the people that you work with and who are around you. So how you show up in your everyday life is how you make it happen. And ironically, I'm getting to practice everything that I want to do by taking people back to Cape Town in my daily job now, while I'm building the finances to be able to kind of work towards my bigger vision of having that company.
Okay, so you're essentially building up a tourism company to help people get out into the wilderness and learn what you've been mastering in the knowledge of Ubuntu. And that's essentially what you got into?
Yeah, and then what's interesting is the second part of that was, so the trip to Cape Town was all about the community aspect. And what better way to learn about community and Ubuntu than in the country that it actually is represented by it. And the other aspect of how do you push yourself to actually know what you're capable of? Well, you have to do difficult things. And while I don't expect people to go and do what the kids did and live in the wilderness for 60 to 90 days, I took away one of the most profound things from that process, which was teaching these kids to make fire from scratch. It was actually one of the things that I was the most excited about, because I was a scout when I was a kid, but all the principles in South Africa are very different to here. And so I was like, man, that'd be pretty cool to actually know how to make a fire from scratch. Not actually realizing that this natural disaster we just had with a hurricane hitting us, where we'd be without power for 2 weeks and we still currently without potable water, that all those skills would actually come into hand. But the great thing about the fire from scratch is it's teaching you a process. So what are the materials I need? What is step 1? What's step 2? What's step 3? You cannot jump from step 1 to step 5. The fire will go out. And it teaches you how to tap into your reservoirs of patience. It teaches you perseverance. It teaches you planning. And once you've, again, learned those principles, you can master it. And instead of taking 5 hours to make a fire from scratch, you can eventually do it in 5 minutes. And so the second aspect was using my book to kind of go around and talk to schools and individuals and be like, right, instead of waiting for chaos to find you or a challenge to rock up like COVID did for all of us, or like now with this natural disaster, why not dive and run towards a challenge and learn about yourself in the process? Because being uncomfortable is not great. It's something that we all shy away from. It's why the majority of people are not able to do an Ironman, because of the amount of pain that you have to overcome and the discipline that it takes to continuously push yourself when everything in your body and your brain is saying, I'm done, I want to stop. And what we don't realize is that all the greatest experiences are on the other side of going that one extra mile or that one extra strike of the rock to get that spark and actually get that fire going. And so that, unfortunately, is going to take a serious dent with the amount of destruction that we've had in Asheville. So I'm going to have to pivot and see how I can maybe do things differently. And also, I don't know if we will be operating under a fire ban with the amount of downed trees that we've had in the area. But I'm just very grateful that at least I have the backbone of my job at Whole Foods, which enables me to just kind of have that stability while continuously working towards what I really want to be doing in the long term. And who knows? I mean, like, I might actually one day be able to get to see my book in Whole Foods, which would be pretty cool, and something that my 10-year-old South African brain would have never ever imagined.
Tell me a little bit more about this idea of pursuing challenges from your perspective. I've had a lot of podcast guests share somewhat a similar message. This idea that, like, you're going to grow through doing the hard things. You're not going to grow through doing the easy things. But can you tell me a little bit more about this from your perspective, specifically for you, how it's helped you learn some key lessons and what you've achieved from doing the things which are harder, especially in our society today, right? We're in a society where everything's as easy as it can possibly be, right? We've got air conditioning. We've got, if we're bored, we've got social media. If we're lacking inspiration, we can do whatever we want on Netflix. Like, it's very easy to avoid challenges. It's very easy to hit the snooze button, to sleep in a little bit longer, all of that, right? So I think that people who are listening to this innately kind of agree with this notion that pursuing the challenge or doing the challenging things is going to be beneficial for them. But at the same time, they know that, like, is it really worth it? I've kind of like got everything that I want. It's like, life's kind of pretty easy right now. Like, why would I want to have to keep pursuing the challenges that people 2, 3, 4 generations always had to go through, where today life's a whole lot easier? Like, is that really going to benefit me?
How old are you?
I'm 34.
34, okay. Did you, by any chance, ever hear a song called Sunscreen by Baz Luhrmann?
Yeah, long time ago.
Yeah.
Wow.
In that song, I'll never forget, I actually still have it on my playlist. And it's so interesting because, quick side note, he says in there, live in Northern California once, but leave before it makes you soft. I've done that. Live in New York City once, but leave before it makes you hard. I've also done that, which also blows my brain. But in there, he says this line of something along the lines of, whether you have a wealthy spouse or a trust fund, you never know when either one might run out. And I think, you know, those are kind of like lyrics that probably as a little kid stuck with me, because my mom said to me when I was very young, I hope you suffer. And that was in the most loving possible way. I had the most amazing childhood that I could ever ask for, with the best that they could do for us. And what she was saying is, she knew that life is hard. And whether your trust fund or your spouse run out, like, those are external circumstances that you have no control over. Like right now, we've just had a natural disaster, like, rip through our community that so many people were unprepared for, not just physically, but emotionally and mentally as well. So I think the hardest thing is actually just being honest with yourself and being like, yeah, life might be great right now, but I have no idea how bad it could get or what's going to happen. And something is going to happen. I mean, who would have thought COVID would have happened and decimated so many middle-class families, family businesses that had been going for like 3 generations? And I think the reality is it's not so much about the success that you have. It's about what have you done to achieve it, because whatever happens that removes it, like right now, if you had built a 30-year business and Hurricane Helene destroyed that, it would take you a while before you tapped into your own understanding of like, nothing has changed within me. My circumstances have changed, but the same person that built that company over 30 years can build another company. And it means that whatever punch hits you down to the ground, you're prepared to get up one more time. It doesn't matter how many times you fall over. And I know it sounds like very cliche, but that you just have to get up one more time. And the problem with like Instagram and all these motivational posters and seeing other people's lives is that's external circumstances. Like nothing is going to change unless you actually use the 3 words in action, and that is act. You can have all the best intentions, you can say all the mantras, you can meditate all you want. If you have an idea and you don't take the next step towards that goal and be comfortable with that it's going to be awkward, you're going to maybe look like a fool to somebody, but who cares in the long run? Because that person, like I'll give you a quick example. One of the most interesting questions in March for me when I was climbing the mountain was I had a great friend who texted, it's his birthday today actually. And he loved what I was doing so much. He went to his company and he said, how can we support Andrew? I think we should, get involved. And they brought me in, they had a conversation and they're like, you know what? We love what you're doing so much. We're going to sponsor our staff to take a day off and come and hike with you. How do we make that happen? And so I was like, okay, let's create some days and almost like an event. And they can select which of the days works for them. And then I'll just keep a record of how many people come up. And then, I didn't know how much they were going to pay at the end, but they basically brought up one of those cool golf checks to the top of Table Mountain at the end of the month. But what was interesting is by having a corporate join me with so many people that I didn't know, I kept getting asked the question, don't you get bored doing the same route every day? And my initial response was like, of course I don't. Like every day is different. I'm doing it at sunrise, at sunset. It's raining, it's windy, it's sunny. Like there's all these different factors. And then eventually I was like, okay, there's something I'm not getting about this question that I need to think deeper about. And I had a couple of days in between climbing with that company, Did You Outsource? And the very next time the person asked me a question, I was like, you know what? I've come to realize that boredom is a basic lack of appreciation for our 5 senses and the gift of life. There are people who would absolutely give everything in their life to be able to walk up this mountain because they're paraplegic. There's somebody that's blind that would kill to be able to see all the mundane rocks that I am walking past every single day. And there's somebody that has never heard the beauty of like the birds that are tweeting in the morning. So as soon as I answered it with that response, for the next 9 months, I was never asked that question again. And I think that's part of like what you're asking is like, how do we actually suck the bone marrow out of life? It's like, we don't know until we really challenge and start to understand what are we capable of. And what I loved is, towards the end of the year, everybody was saying, you're going to be so depressed when you're off the mountain. And I was like, okay, this is something else I can think about. Why would I be depressed? I'd be like, well, I'd be depressed if the mountain defined everything that I thought I was. Because now that I'm not on the mountain, oh my God, I'm not that person, and that would make me depressed. And so what I realized was that those climbs didn't define who I was as a person, but they showed me what I'm capable of. And so it gave me the perfect question to keep pushing myself, and that is, what am I capable of next? That's a way of like understanding and being grateful for the experience of what I've just gone through, and not looking for the next thing because I have a void deep within and this need to constantly prove that I am worthy of attention and like all this adoration and whatever else, and success and money and whatever that we feel like we need. When I got to a point where I didn't need validation from anybody, I didn't need anybody's permission. And for the first time in my life, I actually was so proud of something that I had thought of and seen through to completion, even when I had no one had given me a chance of completing that. And so now that question of like, what am I capable of, is exciting for me, because like even where I am now, even with Whole Foods, like, yeah, it might not be something that's a long-term vision for me, but it doesn't mean that I can't show up at work every day and make such a huge impact with those people. And case in point, like with everything that we've just gone through with the natural disaster, most of the time shoppers coming into a grocery store, they couldn't give two stuffs about you or your day. They see you as like subservient to them and like, you want to talk to me. When we first opened after the power went out and everybody was running out of food, the amount of gratitude that they were showing for us was like unlike anything that I've ever experienced before. And I had to remind all my colleagues, I was like, we're not doing anything different today than we are any other day. It's just that their awareness has been heightened because they now actually realize in the grand scheme of things, what a wonderful place, this grocery store that brings them organic, wholesome food that nourishes their body and their soul all the time. Like to your point, that convenience thing. Convenience is probably the biggest scourge on like human progress. Like it's been great in terms of what we've been able to save time, quote unquote, on. But just think of like TV dinners. Now, instead of a family cooking wholesome food from scratch, sitting around a table, talking about their day, let's just pop it in the microwave for 5 minutes. We all sit around the TV and just stare at this box and, are disconnected from each other. So I think really taking a hard look at, okay, how is this convenience really helping me in terms of discovering what I'm capable of? And then running towards things that are so difficult. And that's why I think these endurance sports and athletes and even SEALs, Navy SEALs, become such great businessmen is because they have the capacity to understand what real pain feels like and to just keep pushing that little bit further. So at most point where people are going to give up and be like, you know what, my book should have been published 5 years ago. I'm just, you know what, it's too hard. I'm going to give up. Like, no, like how much did this book really mean to me? And here I am almost 6 years after I'd finished climbing. I finally have the book that I'm able to share it with others and hopefully show them the true power of what's on the other side, what's on the other side of like pushing your boundaries and the transformational experience that you can create just by exploring the really challenging aspects that your brain is saying, snooze, not today, it's too cold. I can't get fit, that's what other people do. I can't start a business because that's what other people do. And obviously the list goes on.
Okay. Yeah, no, this is cool. Thank you for the conversation. What I'd suggest we do as a quick summary is maybe if you want to share like the top 3 or 5 life lessons that you've learned so far. Maybe you're still working on them. Maybe you've learned them and you feel like you've somewhat mastered. But in the essence of what you're sharing of Ubuntu, as in sharing with the tribe and with the community what you've learned, do you want to share your top 3 or 5 life lessons that you can share as the finishing note for this episode?
Well, I think the first one was a retroactive look at my experience when I was playing cricket. I was very gifted. I was really good. I got into like the top area sides in the provincials when I was very young. But then I went to a really powerful all boys school. And then now I was with my equals, if not better than me. And I essentially, in my final year to try and make the first team, did everything the opposite I'd done my entire cricket career. And that is, I did nothing. I basically convinced myself I wasn't good enough to be in the first team. And so I didn't practice through the summer holidays. And of course, never made the first team. So it became a self-fulfilling prophecy. And so that first lesson was really tapping into what is within my control and how do I push myself so that even if I hadn't made the first team, I could have still gone like, man, I spent every waking hour that summer pushing towards making that first team. I just happened to be in a group of guys that were exceptional, and that's going to happen in life. But, at least I tried my best to get in there. The second thing that I've really, really magically learned with the wilderness therapy aspect is separating the behavior from the person. So in this polarizing time when we're having conversations with others, it's so easy to dismiss somebody else because they think differently to us. But when I had the opportunity to live with these kids and hear their backgrounds and their experiences, I was able to put myself in that position and be like, how strong of a human being am I that I would just automatically do something different than what they did with their set of circumstances? And the second part of that is when you see the golden nugget in everybody, it means that by separating that behavior, you're able to focus on how do I actually tap into their best essence and connect with that person, because you never know, you might spark something in them that enables them to just be like, wow, this person actually listened to what I had to say. And that one sentence of like, maybe go and listen to this podcast of this guy that's gotten KKK members to like hand in their robes. Like that would just transform them to hear how creating space and listening to other people is so transformative as well. And then the third one is doing a lot of self-work on self-worth, because I think for a lot of my life, I was constantly seeking validation or permission for things because I didn't believe that I was worth, all this attention or any attention or positive attention. And going through that process of having that idea to climb the mountain every day and it literally felt like my soul had been set on fire. I was so excited about it. And to not get that response kind of beam back at me was one of the hardest things that I had to go through. And it forced me literally to go to the mountain to reconnect with that idea. And, on the bench that I was sitting overlooking Cape Town, my name happened to be etched in the bench. And there was a magical sunset to the left. And at that point, it was like, why are you doing this? Are you doing this because it's going to create whatever perception in other people's brain? Or is it because you know that this is going to be the greatest test of your life and you're excited to see how you step up to that and what you're going to learn from it? And that was basically, I would say, the first real time that I had taken everything that I'd heard about self-worth and able to actively work on it every single day by climbing the mountain and being proud of just getting to the top that day, not worrying about, have I done it every day for 365 in a row? So that self-worth journey, it's still something that I'm working on now. It's not like you magically get bestowed these powers by the fairy godmother at the end of a really difficult challenge. But what it does is it just puts a chink in whatever negative armor or negative thoughts that you may have of, I'm not good enough or I'm not worthy. And as soon as you have a tangible result of overcoming something difficult, it enables you to override that little voice in your head. And I got to see that with the kids. So I'm never going to get out of this program, or I can never make a fire. And then as soon as they made that fire, I was able to say, well, I thought, just think about it. You said you were never going to be able to do this. What else in your life have you said that you would never be able to do? And you could see their brain just like churning over. And while they might not, they might dismiss you in that moment, it was something that enabled them to like really sit and also be proud of. And I think that's something that's so overlooked, of doing something difficult means that nobody will ever be able to take that away from you. It doesn't, anybody can say what they like about, like David Goggins as well. Like you and I will probably have opinions about how much he's damaging his body, but like maybe he's not stressed about having to go through 35 knee operations before he turns 50, because he's so vividly attacking his goal and what he believes he needs to put out to the world. Like that's what his thing is. Like good on him. But no one's ever going to be able to take away his insane list of accomplishments that he's done. And that is something that, while I might not agree with like the lengths to which he goes, I can still respect the willpower and the mind power that he has to actually just be like, no, he's constantly going, what am I capable of next? Like, okay, I did Navy SEALs 3 times. The third time was on basically like a broken leg. Sometimes we need outliers like that obviously can show people what we're capable of, but also hopefully not just make people think that that's the level and extremities that they need to go to experience that kind of transformational, amazing moment of, there was this hard thing I thought I would never be able to do, and here I am sitting here talking to my kids one day, or just my colleague or anybody, about what I actually managed to achieve.
Yeah, Goggins has even answered questions about that with his knees and all the rest. But I suspect his main benefit that is shared with the world is this idea that you can overcome your apathy. If you're feeling apathetic, if you feel like you can't do something, just go and do it and prove to yourself that it can actually be done. That seems to be the best message from him. All the rest of it, take it with a grain of salt. No, thank you. We've spoken about some pretty cool things in this conversation, especially around the ideas of Ubuntu, doing the hard or challenging things, and just continuously reassessing your self-worth. Not your worth in terms of how other people are seeing you, but really what your worth is yourself. Is there anything else which you wanted to add for those who are listening, or any final message you wanted to share with them?
My final thing would be those ideas that pop into your head at a random moment are not random. They were given to you for a reason. While that reason may not be apparent to you in the moment, I really urge you to just acknowledge whatever that thought is and to honor it by actually pursuing it, because you have no idea how that one idea of yours could potentially not just change your own life, but somebody else's. And the learning that comes through pursuing that simple thought could be the greatest thing that you ever do. So some people might call it intuition. Some people might say it's like God speaking to them. Whatever your beliefs are and whatever you attach to that thought, where it comes from, I really just urge you to pay close attention to it.
Excellent note to end on. Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you.
So I hope you received a whole lot of value from engaging in that conversation. What were the key takeaways for you? What can you schedule in your life right now to make sure that the time you just invested into listening to this exceptional conversation with this amazing mentor and this amazing individual is time that wasn't misused, but was time that you've allocated properly to enhancing your life and improving it? Whatever it is, schedule it now, practice it now, be the successful person you're meant to be, live with purpose.